At the will reading, my parents laughed while handing my sister $6.9 million. Me? They gave me $1 and said, "Go earn your own." My mother smirked. Some kids just don't measure up. But when the lawyer read Grandpa's final letter, my mom started screaming. I didn't join the noise. I didn't beg. I sat in the high-back leather chair of Mr. Blackwood's sterile office and watched them. My parents, Thomas and Susan, were dressed for a photo shoot, not a funeral. My sister Stephanie was already mentally spending her millions on a new listing portfolio. They looked at me like I was a smudge on the lens. The lawyer handed me a single, thick envelope. Inside, a silver dollar. Heavy, cold. My father laughed. A sharp, cruel sound. See? Even Arthur knew what you were worth. I didn't react. I just put on my white archival gloves, picked up the envelope, and walked out the door. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. The fairy horn blasted, a low, mournful sound that signaled the end of the noise. I watched Seattle's skyline, with all its glass and ambition, shrink in the rearview mirror until it was just a gray smudge against the rain. My sister Stephanie was probably popping champagne right now. To her, $12 million was just liquidity for her next luxury flip. That's what she did. She took hollow shells, staged them with rented furniture, and sold them as dream homes. She sold facades. She was good at it. Me? I'm an archivist. I don't stage things. I preserve them. I check the foundation. I look for the rot behind the drywall. For the last 5 years, while Thomas and Susan were busy maintaining their country club memberships and Stephanie was building her personal brand, I was the one changing Grandpa Arthur's bedsheets. I was the one listening to him when his words started to loop and fade, capturing his memories before they dissolved into the fog of dementia. They saw a dying old man who was taking too long to let go of his assets. I saw a library burning down. And I was trying to save every book I could. My mother screamed back in that office because she lost control of the narrative. I didn't scream because I knew the narrative better than they did. Tears require surprise, and nothing that happened in that room surprised me. I had watched them ignoring him for a decade. I had watched my father check his watch during hospital visits. I knew exactly who they were. I looked down at the envelope on the passenger seat. $1 silver. They thought it was an insult. A final slap in the face to the granddaughter who didn't measure up to their financial standards. But they didn't know Arthur. Arthur didn't do insults. He did puzzles. He was an inventor. A man who built things to last. Unlike my parents, who built things to sell. I wasn't running away to the San Juan Islands to hide. I was commuting. I was going to the one place my family had let fall into ruin because it lacked curb appeal. The remote cabin on Orcas Island. They saw it as a teardown. I knew it was a vault. I put the car in gear as the ferry docked. The rain was coming down harder now, washing away the city grime. I wasn't just a disappointed heir holding a coin. I was the keeper of the archive. And I was about to open the file. The cabin smelled of damp cedar and neglect. To my parents, this place was a liability. A piece of real estate that was too rustic to list without a complete gut renovation. To me, it was the only place Arthur ever really breathed. I didn't turn on the main lights. I set up my portable work lamp on his old drafting table, the one stained with decades of ink and coffee rings. I took the silver dollar out of the envelope. It wasn't standard currency. The weight was off. I pulled my loupe from my kit, a jeweler's magnifying glass I used for inspecting old manuscripts, and brought the coin into focus. It wasn't struck by a mint. It was machined. Arthur had made this. I ran my thumb along the rim. To the naked eye, it was just ridges. Under the glass, it was data. Tiny, laser-etched numbers. Latitude, longitude, elevation. My phone buzzed against the wood of the table, vibrating like an angry insect. It was Stephanie. Mom says you stole the safety deposit box key. Bring it back, or I'm calling the police. Another buzz. We know you're at the cabin. Don't touch anything. That property is part of my portfolio now. I have a buyer flying in on Thursday. Her messages were frantic, misspelled, desperate. She was already liquidating assets she didn't even fully possess yet. She was hunting for easy cash, jewelry, bonds, things that glittered. She didn't understand that Arthur never hid his treasure in a bank vault. He hid it in plain sight, protected by the one thing my family lacked: patience. I didn't reply. I didn't block her. I just turned the phone face down. The silence returned, heavy and comforting. I looked back at the numbers. The elevation data was the key, 0.3 meters below the foundation line. I grabbed my pry bar and a high-lumens flashlight. I wasn't looking at the room as a house anymore. I was looking at it as a schematic. I paced it out. The coordinates didn't lead outside. They pointed directly beneath the drafting table where I stood. I knelt on the floorboards. Most people would just see dusty pine planks. I saw the grain pattern. One board, right near the table leg, didn't match the aging of the others. It was subtle. Arthur was a perfectionist, but the varnish was a fraction of a shade lighter. I slid the flat edge of the pry bar into the seam. My family would have used a sledgehammer. They would have torn this place apart looking for a wall safe. I applied gentle, consistent leverage. The wood groaned, a low protest, and then popped free. Darkness stared back at me, a perfectly cut rectangular hole in the subfloor, and sitting there, nestled in insulation like a heart in a chest, was a fireproof metal box. It wasn't locked. It didn't need to be. Arthur knew that the only person who would ever find it was the one person who knew how to listen to what he wasn't saying. I lifted the lid. Inside, there was no gold, no diamonds, just a stack of leather-bound journals and a thick folder of legal documents. I picked up the journal on top. It was dated 10 years ago, the year Arthur had his stroke, the year my parents suddenly took over his financial affairs. I opened to the first page, and Arthur's voice filled the room, louder than the rain, louder than Stephanie's texts. I wasn't just reading a diary, I was reading a crime scene report. The journal entry was dated October 14th, 10 years ago. It was written in a shaky hand, the penmanship of a man fighting his own body to regain control. I woke up today, Arthur wrote. They thought I was still asleep. Thomas was on the phone with the patent office. Susan was signing my name on the transfer documents. They think I'm broken. They think the stroke took my mind along with my speech. They are wrong. I turned the page. The handwriting grew stronger as the months passed. It wasn't the rambling of a sick old man. It was the meticulous log of a spy in enemy territory. He chronicled every theft. Every time Susan borrowed money from his accounts to stage a new listing. Every time Thomas forged a signature to sell off a piece of land. Why didn't he stop them? I had asked myself that question 1,000 times in the last 5 years. Why did he let them treat him like a burden? Why did he let them humiliate me? The answer was on page 42. I see how they treat Anna. They ignore her because she is quiet. They mistake her silence for weakness, just like they mistake my paralysis for stupidity. If I fight them now, they will cut her off. They will send her away to boarding school, or worse. They will burn the evidence before I can secure it. I have to wait. I have to let them think they have won. I have to let them get comfortable in their greed. That is the only way to catch them with their hands fully in the jar. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, hot and sudden. It wasn't grief this time, it was validation. He hadn't abandoned me. He had been protecting me. He had endured a decade of their condescension, their fake smiles, their caregiver act, just to buy me time. He had turned himself into a vault, to keep me safe, until I was strong enough to open it. This was the silent regret of the guardian. He knew the cost. He knew I would grow up feeling unloved by my parents. He knew I would feel like an outsider, but he accepted that pain because the alternative, leaving me with nothing but their lies, was worse. He chose to be misunderstood, so that I could eventually be vindicated. I closed the journal. My hand was resting on the thick legal folder at the bottom of the box. The label on it was simple: Project Clearwater. I knew that name. It was the failed invention my parents always joked about. Grandpa's pipe dream, Stephanie called it. The reason he never made real money. They said he wasted years trying to invent a water filter that never worked. I opened the folder. The first document wasn't a sketch. It was a patent. A fully granted, utility patent, for a graphene oxide filtration membrane, dated 10 years ago. The second document was a transfer of sale. It transferred the exclusive rights to the patent to a holding company owned by a massive industrial conglomerate. The purchase price was $5,000. $5,000. For technology that could clean industrial wastewater for pennies on the gallon. But then I saw the signature. Arthur Sterling. It was smooth, bold, confident. It was the signature of a healthy man. But the date was 3 weeks after his stroke. My parents hadn't just given bad advice. They hadn't just sold a failing company. They had forged a paralyzed man's signature to sell a world-changing invention for a quick payout because they needed cash for a down payment on a yacht. They stole his legacy. They suppressed technology that could have saved lives just to maintain their curb appeal. The sound of a boat engine cut through the rain outside. It was loud, aggressive, getting closer. I looked out the window. Lights were cutting through the dark, sweeping across the wet trees. They were here. Thomas, Susan, and Stephanie. They had come to evict me. They had come to take the cabin. I looked back at the table. The journal. The patent. The forgery. They thought they were storming a teardown. They didn't know they were walking into a courtroom. The door didn't open. It was thrown against the wall. The wind howled in, carrying rain and the screech of 3 people who had never been told no in their lives. Thomas entered first, his Italian loafers skidding on the wet floorboards. Susan was right behind him, clutching her pearls as if the cabin air might tarnish them. Stephanie brought up the rear, phone in hand, already recording, already trying to spin the eviction of her sister into content. "Get out," my father roared. His face was red, a stark contrast to the gray storm outside. "You are trespassing on Stephanie's property. We're selling this place to a developer on Monday, and I will not have you dragging down the valuation with your clutter." He gestured wildly at the drafting table, at the sacred space I had just unlocked. My mother stepped forward, her voice a practiced mix of pity and venom. "Amanda, honey, look at you, you're filthy. Just take your dollar and go. We'll send you a check for your gas. Just stop embarrassing us." I didn't move. I didn't shout back. I felt a strange, icy calm settle over me. It was the calm of a historian who has finally found the missing link in the archive. I picked up the patent document with my gloved hand and held it under the worklight. "October 14th, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through their noise like a scalpel. That was the day Grandpa had his stroke. He couldn't speak. He couldn't hold a pen. Yet, somehow, on October 14th, he signed over the exclusive rights to the clean water membrane for $5,000. The room went deadly silent. The wind battered the windows. But inside, the air had been sucked out. That's administrative detail," my father stammered, his eyes darting to the document. "You don't understand business, Amanda." "I understand forgery," I corrected him. "And I understand federal patent fraud." I laid the journal next to the patent. "He documented it, Dad. Every day you came into his room. Every paper you forced in front of him. He was trapped in his body, but his mind was recording everything. You didn't build a legacy. You stole it from a sick man." "It's a lie," Susan hissed, but she backed away, bumping into the wall. "It's the ramblings of a senile old man." "Is it?" A shadow detached itself from the darkness of the hallway. Mr. Blackwood stepped into the light. He wasn't wearing his usual courtroom suit. He was wearing a raincoat, and he looked like an executioner. "Mr. Riley," Blackwood said, his voice gravel and iron. "The silver dollar Amanda received was not a bequest. It was a token of consideration. By accepting it and finding the vault, she triggered the secondary clause of Arthur's estate." He placed a new document on the table. "The patent rights have been recovered. The intellectual property theft has been verified. The value of the estate is not $20 million. With the reinstated royalties, it is closer to $50 million. Stephanie gasped, the sound greedy and sharp. $50 million? "And it belongs entirely to the finder," Blackwood finished. "To Amanda." That was the moment. The power flip. I watched them. I watched the arrogance drain out of my father's face, leaving behind something saggy and gray. I watched my mother's posture collapse. It wasn't just fear. It was the illusion of power in an empty wallet. For my entire life, I had looked up to them as giants. They were the successful ones, the powerful ones, the ones who knew how the world worked. But as I stood there, looking at Thomas shaking in his wet designer coat, I realized their power had never been real. It was a costume they rented. They didn't have status, they had bought it with stolen money. Their confidence wasn't a character trait, it was a byproduct of a bank account they didn't earn. Now that the account was zero, the personality was gone. There was no Thomas the Titan, or Susan the socialite. There were just two petty criminals standing in a drafty cabin, shivering because they had no internal heat to keep them warm. "Amanda," my father whispered, his voice trembling. "We're family. You can't leave us with nothing." "I'm not leaving you with nothing," I said, closing the journal. "I'm leaving you with the truth. And honestly, it's more than you left, Grandpa." Mr. Blackwood laid 2 stacks of paper on the table. The sound was heavy, final. "Option A," he said, his voice devoid of sympathy. "We hand this evidence to the federal prosecutor. Given the scale of the fraud and the forgery of a medical document, you are looking at a minimum of 15 years, each." My mother let out a sob that sounded more like a choke. "Option B," Blackwood continued. "You sign over all remaining assets to the estate to cover the restitution. You relinquish all claims to the properties, the accounts, and the patent royalties. You leave this island with nothing but your clothes and your vehicle. And you never contact Amanda again." My father looked at the pen. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely hold it. He didn't look at me. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He looked at the paperwork like it was a death certificate for his reputation. He knew that signing meant poverty, but prison meant public exposure. And for Thomas Sterling, the only thing worse than being poor was being known as a fraud. He signed. The scratch of the pen was the loudest sound in the world. Susan signed next, tears ruining her mascara, dripping onto the legal pad. She wasn't crying for me. She wasn't crying for the husband she had betrayed or the father-in-law she had robbed. She was crying for her country club membership. She was crying because she knew she would never again be able to look down on someone and feel superior. Stephanie didn't have to sign anything. She had nothing to give. Her empire was built on their credit lines. Without their backing, she was just a realtor with no listings and a leased BMW she couldn't afford. She looked at me, and for the first time, I didn't see the golden child. I saw a scared little girl who realized she had no skills, no substance, and no safety net. "Get out," I said. They didn't argue. They shuffled out into the rain, smaller, grayer, like ghosts fading as the sun came up. I listened to the boat engine start, sputter, and then fade into the distance. The silence returned to the cabin. But this time, it wasn't the silence of neglect. It was the silence of peace. Mr. Blackwood packed up his briefcase. "Your grandfather would be proud, Amanda. The patent is yours. The royalties are projected to be significant. You can do whatever you want with it." I looked at the patent drawings. The clean water membrane. It could save millions of lives. It could change agriculture in drought zones. My parents had buried it for a quick payout. "Release it," I said. Blackwood paused. "Release it? To the public domain," I said. "Open source. No royalties, no barriers." That's what Arthur wanted. He didn't invent it to get rich. He invented it to help. Let's finish his work. Blackwood smiled. A genuine expression that transformed his stern face. "I'll have the papers drawn up." He left on the next ferry, leaving me alone on the island. The rain stopped. The clouds broke, and a shaft of pale sunlight hit the water, illuminating the spot where the coordinates pointed. I walked out onto the porch. I took a deep breath of the pine-scented air. I wasn't just the keeper of the archive anymore. I was the author of the next chapter. And this part is for you. To the black sheep. To the ones who feel like they are standing on the fringe of their own families. To the ones who sit at the kids' table while the adults discuss things that don't matter. To the ones who are called too sensitive, too quiet, or too difficult just because you see things they don't want you to see. I know how heavy that silence feels. I know what it's like to be the observer in a room full of performers. They make you feel like your silence is a weakness. They make you feel like you are less than them because you don't play their game. But listen to me. Your position on the edge gives you a view they will never have. You see the cracks in the foundation while they are busy painting the walls. You see the truth while they are busy selling the lie. Do not let them convince you that you are measuring up to the wrong standard. You are not a failed version of them. You are the archivist. You are the guardian of the truth. And one day, the storm will come, and their paper houses will fall. And when that happens, you will be the only one left standing, because you built your life on the bedrock of who you really are. Hold on to your truth. Keep your archives. Your day is coming.